This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my pleasure to welcome our next guest today, Mr. AMAY Aggarwal from Anglera. Welcome, AMAY.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Super cool to have you along for the ride today. We met in person finally for the first time at Shop Talk in Vegas a few months ago. It's hard to believe that it was that long ago already, and you've attended Shop Talk again in Europe, in Spain.
Yeah, exactly. We were there a couple of weeks ago. Always good. Good conference.
Yeah, the great thing about Shop Talk, I like the speed dating aspect of Shop Talk, especially obviously if you're a platform vendor. It's great to be able to get your face in front of a whole bunch of different brands, curated list of people to meet with and sit down and have conversations with. It's a great way to meet a lot of people in a very compressed period of time, isn't it?
100%. And I think ShopTalk is super friendly to startups like us. And so that's why we love it. How we always kind of get the perks and get to meet a bunch of really cool people. Very innovative conference. So yeah, we make sure to be at everyone.
I love it. I love it. Listen, we're going to have a great chat about Anglera and what you guys are building over there and how you got to be in this space. But before we do that, and you're a YC, you're a product of YC, and let's talk about that as well. But before we do, why don't we get into a little bit about how you came to be in this space in the first place? Come from a tech background, obviously. You went to Stanford, you product manager over at Uber for nearly 3 years. You're definitely, I would consider you to have an engineering mindset and really a deep technical mindset. But why don't you tell me what drew you into this world?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it was actually facing some of the challenges that we're solving now at my previous role at Uber. And so more specifically, I was working on Uber Eats on our retail delivery business. And as part of that business, we had to onboard millions of products from every retailer, right? The Targets of the world, all across small mom and pop shops. And that became a huge challenge. So we had teams all across the world doing it manually. And we had our ML algorithms internally trying to label all of the products, extract attributes, categorize the products, and just seeing all of that kind of process was a big pain point, honestly, at Uber. And I started to think, hey, this is probably not a problem that is unique to Uber. It's probably occurs at every retailer, every marketplace, and even other brands, large brands, right? How do you manage, enrich all the product information that you have available? And that's how I stumbled into this problem. So as you mentioned, we went through Y Combinator, started to get some of our additional customers and design partnerships. And ever since then, it's been quite shocking to see that this problem still exists and how large it is. And everyone that we chat with is faced it in some way or another. And so, yeah, I would say it's by chance that we ended up falling into this space and we look back.
Wow, I love it. They say eat your own dog food, scratch an itch, whatever term you want to use for it. I think obviously if you've experienced a challenge or an opportunity firsthand, and then you build something to address that challenge or opportunity, that's probably one of the best ways you can possibly build. I know with my consultancy, I was like, I want to turn the whole concept of consultancy on its head, and I want to build a structure and the way that I do things, the way I deliver, and even my pricing model, the way I run things as a subscription. I wanted to just do things differently to the rest of the market. And it's because I've been on the other side. I've been a customer on the other side of receiving services from service providers. And I was like, I didn't always like the way that those services were provided to me or the way that they were billed to me. And I want to do it differently as a result. So I think if you've experienced pain in a specific area and you try to address that pain in market, then you come in better informed than you would otherwise.
100% is the information, but also the motivation. You're like, have a personal kind of commitment to solve this problem and a deep rooted, you've gone through all the frustrations of facing it yourself. You go talk to customers and you're like, I was in your shoes and I would know exactly what you're facing. And here's how we can work together to solve it. So I'd say obviously the information, but yeah, the motivation is probably the even bigger kind of part of it. And I'm sure you've that too with some of the consulting work that you're doing.
Yeah, and look, I think what's really interesting about your technology is that this is a universal challenge. Doesn't matter whether you're a B2C business, a B2B business, a D2C business. Really, most businesses that are selling physical goods via an e-commerce or a digital commerce channel, doesn't really matter whether it's an e-commerce website, doesn't matter whether it's via EDI or Punchout or Marketplace or whatever. The reality is if you're selling across any digital channel and you're selling a physical good, you need to have very high quality, very complete, very rich product data to be able to complement those products and be able to sell those products meaningfully. And then you obviously have to have for some channels like the Amazons of the world, not only do you have to have unique data, but you have to map it in such a way and you have to structure it in such a way that it makes that marketplace happy to receive that data and it maps it to the right place in their data schema so that you get categorized properly, so you get listed properly, and you get ultimately presented properly to the right customer at the right time as part of that product discovery process that customers go through or shoppers go through
Yeah.
that can actually be found for the right scenarios that your products actually fit. And so this feels like a very universal challenge. I've faced it with my clients, both when I was working agency side, when I was working as a brand and we were implementing a PIM for the very first time in the business across thousands and thousands of SKUs of products from hundreds of suppliers. I've faced this challenge as a brand. I faced this challenge as an agency, and now I face this challenge as a consultant. So I've run the gamut of seeing this challenge firsthand, and my God, is it pretty universal.
100%. And you bring up discovery and just how users discover products today. And then they're also projecting how are people going to be finding products in the future. And I think that's probably a really interesting topic to dive deeper into, which is the way that consumers are discovering products is fundamentally shifting, right? In the same way that people used to go in stores and then they started shopping online. Now it's really AI agents that are going to be doing a ton of the shopping, right? Personal shopping agents. You need to show up in the search engines like ChatGPT, Perplexity. How consumers search for products is changing. And so a lot of the work that we've been thinking about is how can we make sure that brands, retailers, marketplaces are all ready for that fundamental shift in discovery? And how do they make sure that their content is not just built for our humans when they land on the PDPs, but also built for these AIs, for the AI bots, for the scrapers, for the AI agents that are essentially going to make those purchasing decisions. And so that's just a fundamental shift and everyone is going to have to evolve with that. We'll see how it shapes up, but we really want to be part of enabling the retailers at the forefront of this technology or innovation to stay ahead of that trend rather than have to play catch up, right? Or be resistant to how the world is evolving.
Yeah, no question about it. There's definitely, I think, the fundamental nature of search, merch, personalization, almost every single cascading piece of technology from a commerce or commerce enablement perspective, it relies on really good product data to be able to do a good job and to deliver a good service. And without that, kind of you can build a Ferrari, you can go out and spend big money on all sorts of search, merchant personalization technology, all the way from your Nostos to every kind of technology you can imagine out there, but they all expect and rely on very good, both structured and unstructured product data, attribution, attribute sets, attribute values, arrays of data that can be turned into something useful from a presentation layer perspective. And so all these other sort of downstream technologies and even PIM systems, you have to get the data from somewhere at the end of the day, right? And it feels, even if you have a PIM system in your business today, if you don't have anything to put in the PIM system, then it's probably not going to serve you very well. And you're going to be spending a whole lot of money on technology
Yeah.
that you're not going to get very good value from, your Algolias of the world, etc. You're not going to get tremendous amount of value out of these high-tech Ferrari pieces of technology as part of your stack
Yeah.
unless you have a good foundation of good product data.
No, exactly. And right now, so much of the work that people do in PIMS is so manual, right? You have to go in, fill out and map and standardize and normalize and enrich and look through brand websites and look through PDFs to find that missing information. And it's just a ton of work, but it's also work that is so purpose built for large language models, right? Because they can look through all of this unstructured data, which a human would spend 30 minutes, an hour going through finding all the specs. But we can now look at that at scale and actually structure it in the fields that are required. And along with that, provide explanations. You can ask questions, right? You can have clear tracing for where did you find this information? Was it in a PDF? Was it on the website of the manufacturer? Was it in the image that you're extracting it from? And so I think that's like the really unique why now moment as well about LLMs, where before it's hard to, you'd have some deep learning model that was trained at one very specific task, categorize my products, right? And now you can take a bunch of these different inputs that are all unstructured and then do a lot of the manual work that had to be done before with large teams and make them a lot more efficient. So it's less about the manual data entry, but it's more strategically thinking, hey, what are the attributes that my users need to see when they land on the P2P? How should I be structuring my taxonomies? How can I really improve conversion? How should I be thinking about images about all the products? And so it's less on filling out the data, but more on the strategic thinking, right? And then let Anglera or similar data enrichment platforms fill out that data And you can easily test, iterate things at scale, which is the other really cool benefit is right now, if I wanted to go add an attribute to every one of my products, I'd do that. I'd go spend hours and hours filling everything out. But now you can add it, run it, see the outputs and say, okay, let me tweak it a little bit. And then you have this iterative workflow that you can build up, which is also really interesting because as a programmer, I do that with some of the programming tools that I use. And there's like cursors of the world, there's the windsurfs of the world. And we want to bring that same level of magic to the PIMs of the world or to the e-commerce world, essentially, where it's, hey, everything is very efficient and it's easy, right? And my thinking is less on debugging the little things and it's more on the strategic, let me figure out what I should do next. And then let the AI kind of handhold me and help me do a lot of that manual work that before it would take me hours and hours to do.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you speak specifically of taxonomies because I couldn't agree with you more. Even platforms like Verbolia, and there are other automated SEO platforms out there that basically create SEO optimized pages that are already that represent the demand for search in the market, whether it be through a ChatGPT and answer engine, whether it be through a Google search, whatever it might be. They create effectively category pages, for lack of a better term, by the thousand that are targeted specifically at a pre-filtered set of products and a
Right.
pre-filtered name of a category that matches one for one to major highly popular queries out there in the market around your product set. And so instead of a customer having to land on a top level category, either drill down into the categories or land in a category with 500 products and then apply 5 filters to get down to the 3 products that matter to them, they can be directed, whether it be from a paid search ad that lands them directly on a totally hyper relevant landing page, or from an organic search request that lands them on a pre-filtered set of products so that those 3 products that they wanted to ultimately see anyway turn up on that category page uniquely for them. But again, all these platforms, these automated SEO at scale, these what I call enterprise SEO platforms, the
Yeah.
reality is they require massive sets of structured data and facet and filter data so that
Right.
they can combine together not only the existing category structure and taxonomy, but then they can layer on all of the available attributes and the available filters so that now we effectively create a pre-filtered page. But without that structured data, they don't know how to apply those pre-faceted sets of products in a
Yeah,
meaningful way to match that up with a given query. And even down to scalable SEO, you have to have this data in place, right?
exactly. And I think right now, these bots and these search kind of tools are seeing maybe 20 or 30% of everything there is to know about that product, right? They're seeing very limited information. But what if we go ahead and enrich that, right? And a lot of that information is buried in, on the manufacturer's website, or it's buried in a PDF document that search engine is not going to be able to access, right? They're not going to go parse thousands of pages of PDFs. They're not going to be looking at all of the product images. So how can we really think about extracting the most important attributes that users search by, that users want to see, that AI agents want to see when they land on your page? And how do we surface them so it's very easy, right? There's this concept of kind of creating this LLMs.txt or markdown that, when LLMs land on the page, they know everything they need to know and they don't have to do any more work. Very frictionless for them. And if you do, that's going to help your products actually show up when users search for them. So that's really the important thing is how do you eliminate a lot of those friction gaps and kind of set up yourself for success in the future, which is how are people going to shop in the future? What attributes do they want to see? What do they care about? Right. And it's, again, that fundamental shift in terms of user behavior that is really interesting because now you're searching by questions, right? You're searching more by
A
here's
narrative. You're searching more by narrative, right? You're
yeah,
actually conversationally having the discussion like you would with a sales rep inside of a jewelry store when you walk in.
exactly. And that's exactly it. And you're thinking about here is my use case, or here is my event that's coming up, and here's what I'm looking for. And then you're trying to do this match. No PDP today is going to be like, hey, these are the occasions that these shoes are good for. But that's how people search. And you need to start surfacing attributes like that, right, on your PDPs and have that available to AI models to actually index so that they know to surface those products when users search for them. So I think it's just a really interesting. And another good example that we were chatting with one of our customers about is they sell fridges and this is 100 decibels. Sure, okay. But you should be highlighting that it's a quiet fridge so that when users search for, hey, this is important to them, right? It's a structured attribute that's a tag that then is going to show up. Otherwise, it's two step jump, right? It's like knowing that attribute and then knowing what that means we're trying to eliminate that jump through the hoops for the AI models and make it very easy to say, okay, this is what users are searching for. This is what they're looking for. And that's a whole nother kind of domain, is like analyzing that, tracking that, and then feeding that in back into how you present your data.
Yeah, and I think also we have a unique challenge in the market where some suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, etc., might supply a ton of product data, but it's almost always, or it often can be, very unstructured. Meaning, okay, here's our long description. It might be 5 paragraphs of a long description, and it might have some really rich detail in it. It might be describing this pump in a huge amount of detail in a narrative fashion. It might be telling you how this pump was designed, how it was made, what the throughput capability is, how much head handling capability it has. It can tell you all this information in almost a narrative descriptive way,
Yeah.
but being able to then extract that data out and also add very structured versions of that data to the products so that two products that are similar can be compared side by side based on that standard taxonomy of data and that standard data model, that becomes a real challenge for many brands as well. So even if they have the raw data dump of a whole bunch of unstructured data, it's turning that into something meaningful in addition to the unstructured narrative data. So you might still want the long description on a PDP, but you also want all that additional structured tabular or table-based data so that people can do things like compare things side by side in a product comparison list.
And I think that's what really excites me about this problem, is it's such a clear, like, why now moment, where before LLMs, you couldn't really parse tons of unstructured data and do exactly what you're saying, right? So there's a why now in terms of the technological capability that is now possible, but then there's also why now in the terms of the need of doing this, right? And so it's like this kind of stars aligning moment, which I think is really exciting, is like, this thing needs to be done more than ever before. And now we have technology that makes it available and accessible. So yeah, I think it's just a really interesting time for retail, thinking ahead to what the future is going to look like. And I think everyone has these discussions and they're trying to prepare for the future. But I think it's just a really, I think, interesting time. And I'm really interested to see how it all shapes up.
No question. And as I understand it, in all transparency for my audience, we've never worked on a project together. So I have to go by what's on the tin, and I just have to go by what's on the website and elements of the platform that we've discussed previously. But as I understand it, you can ingest data in multiple different, you base it on multimodal AI. So you can ingest a PDF, you can ingest a CSV, you can ingest images, you can perhaps even search the internet and try to find data based on a SKU match or an ASIN match or something like that. You can obviously, most of the base LLMs have already been trained on data across the internet. So oftentimes they'll already have certain data around specific SKUs or specific products with a specific title in them already that you can bring in and enrich. So is there anything I've missed in terms of data sources that you would typically work with to try to bring into this enrichment cycle?
No, that's exactly it. And the way that we like to think about it is, I don't know if you've ever used deep research on Perplexity or ChatGPT, but it's
Yeah.
very similar, but purpose built for e-commerce, right? So it's going to look through all of that sources of data and then use that to essentially extract the structured attributes that we've been talking about. So just to recap, it would be the PDFs, the images, any provided feeds or CSVs that the suppliers are sending over, and then the websites that we're finding through kind of a web research mode that we have available.
Wow, amazing. And how do you guys see yourself in the universe of apps that are similar? I haven't run across another platform that does things exactly like you do. There's a couple of other platforms out there. In fact, we've had a couple of them on the podcast. We've had Ocular on the podcast before. We've had the DataX guys on the podcast before. So there are platforms out there that have tried to attack this in different ways. Ocular primarily tries to focus on image based attribution. So they'll scan an image basically with machine vision, and then they'll try to extract all the attributes out of that image and say, look, okay, if it's fashion and this is a pink polka dot dress, they'll try to add, and it's got a V-neck and it's mid-length, whatever. Then they'll try to extract all those attributes out and map it into the taxonomy that the merchant has provided to the system, right? And then we have DataX, which it can do web scraping, it can go to target websites, pull data out. And then what it does is it tries to pull it out and map it into your existing taxonomy where it finds effectively text string-based matches where it makes sense to map something into your existing taxonomy. But DataX, interestingly, at least as far as I know, and they'll kill me if I get this wrong, but they don't typically generate a taxonomy or suggest a taxonomy for a data set. They kind of work within existing taxonomies and try to map the data on a one-for-one basis as best they can into that existing taxonomy. So it feels like you're taking elements of what they do, but also doing a whole bunch of stuff that they don't do.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary as to how we're different. So maybe to dive a little bit deeper into the specifics there, at Y Combinator, one of the big principles is really understand what your customers are doing, right? And so we spent the first 3 to 6 months watching people use our tool, right? Figure out the workflows that they're doing and see where the gaps are, what the edge cases are. And rather than thinking about, hey, technology is a good solve to this problem, we actually understood the workflow and we built a very agentic workflow around it. And I think that's the most unique part of our platform is our platform is making decisions like a human would about, hey, I'm missing this attribute. Let me execute a web search to go find that, right? Or I don't know what this is. I can't infer it from the images. So I'm going to look at the PDF user manual and extract it from there. Or, hey, yeah, and this is a really good example that we've seen many times is we have an attribute list and we have an attribute that doesn't map cleanly into any of the values. And so rather than trying to force fit it, the system is intelligent enough to say, hey, why don't you create a new node, right? Or a new category or a new attribute. And so that's like the taxonomy part that you're mentioning as well, where it's thinking a little bit more like a human would, because
Yes.
we've had so long deeply understanding how humans actually think through this, right? Working with merchandising teams, content teams, e-commerce teams to really understand how do they do this task manually? And then how can we start to automate the most manual parts of it so that now they're the reviewers and they're focused on the strategic higher level parts of the flow rather than the manual data entry parts. And so that's really what I think is the most unique part, sourcing that data, finding the missing information rather than just saying, hey, here's what we have available and we can go do some minor tweaks on it. It's a lot more fundamental rethink of the entire workflow end to end. And how can we do that more agentically and intelligently?
And I would assume that in that scenario, you like system integrations would become, if they're not already, very important part of the value prop of the platform. Because at the end of the day, I'd really prefer not to have to export out of your platform to a CSV and then upload it into my PIM system and all that sort of stuff. I'd rather it just automatically and dynamically be mapped into my system of record, whether it's my commerce platform, whether it's my PIM, whatever, whether it's a Google Sheet, might be a Google Sheet that we map things into as a staging point to then push it into other systems. What is the status of kind of your integration set today? And what is your vision for integrations for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, yeah, when we're onboarding new customers, it's usually CSV in, CSV out, as you're mentioning, with the bulk kind of uploads, right? And it's obviously a little messy, but around the couple of months mark, we'll start to think about these integrations with them. And so we have built out some existing integrations with PIM systems that we are continuing to actively expand based on kind of customer requirements and customer needs. But it's really interesting because in kind of the sales tool world, there's a parallel for what we're doing, and it's called Clay. I'm not sure if you've ever used it,
Oh,
but
yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, I haven't used it myself, but many sales orgs do. It's basically enriching a target prospect record with a whole bunch of information so that when we reach out to them, it doesn't maybe come across as cold as it would if we just said, "Hey, Bob, I'd like to tell you this thing. Do you want to tee up a call?"
exactly. And the same way that Clay ingests data into CRMs, we're ingesting data into PIMs or e-commerce platforms, right? So that's really the clean parallel. And we kind of have this playbook that we can follow in terms of how to think about which integrations to prioritize, which ones to build first. Obviously, I think it's a function of what our customers need and what they are asking for, along with kind of the complexity of that integration. And so obviously some PIMs are easier to integrate than others. I won't name any names, but that's how we've been thinking about it internally.
And what do you like? Are the bulk of your current like design partners as well as customers, early customers, because obviously you're brand new, but are you finding like some massive wins in specific retail categories, retail verticals? Are you finding specific wins in B2B, wholesale distribution? And then secondarily, are you finding some wins in certain scale of customers that once they reach a tipping point, maybe they were okay doing things manually when they had 100 SKUs, but once they got to 1,000 plus SKUs, it all of a sudden became completely untenable to continue to do that thing manually. Are you finding specific market segments that work best and specific catalysts and tipping points that
Mhm.
you've identified that you go, hey, once a merchant reaches this scale at some point across their business, then that creates a natural tipping point for them to want to reach out to a platform vendor like us.
Yeah, and I think the natural inflection point that we've seen has been around 10K plus SKUs, because you obviously have new SKUs constantly coming in. So that's a new rotational basis. And so that's interesting because let's say you have 10K SKUs and you have a 5% kind of change every
Sure.
month. Exactly. And so out of that's 500, right? And so the larger the catalog, the bigger the pain point and kind of the more that we're able to offer in terms of our value. So I think that's been the main inflection point. In terms of industries, that's also a really interesting one and something that we've thought a lot about across both B2C and B2B world, right? B2B, I think there's a lot more focus on specifications, right? Technical attributes. And so something like tools has been a really good
Oh
uh,
yeah.
channel for us. On the B2C side, we've seen a lot of traction with apparel, furniture, and appliances. So appliances is great because they have these model numbers. And again, you know what types of features you're looking for when you're buying a new fridge, right? You want to know if it has an ice maker or not, the energy rating. And similar with apparel, they're getting constantly new products every season. And so it's such a drain on their kind of merchandising teams to get all of those ready for sale. Sometimes there's delays, right? And you just like, the team is so slammed with trying to onboard 10,000 products in preparation for the new season. And then there's delays and then you miss the season start date and you're like, oh, like we're just losing tons of money, tons of sales because it's taking so long to onboard this. So that's really the value prop that we've seen resonate with the apparel companies and furniture companies is time to market, which is from the moment you know that you're going to start to sell these products, how quickly can we get all of them listed and ready for sale? Because that's all incremental days of revenue that you're generating for your customers. And that's even bigger value prop to them is those days that we're capturing of additional sales, less than even the time savings aspect. Obviously, they're very closely correlated, but those are a few of the industries that we've really tackled into, but definitely happy to deep dive more into anything that interests you there.
And how do you, and it's hard for me to formulate this question in a way that will make sense, but historically what I have found is that even more technical attributes, and even though they might be accurate attributes, they may not be as meaningful to a potential buyer as describing them in a slightly different contextual way. And I'll give you an example. So let's say I sell fridges, right? Now, I might know the liter capacity of the internal size of the fridge. I might know the internal liter size capacity of the freezer. I might know how many shelves and drawers it has. I might know if it has a servitor for drinks. I might even know all the external dimensions, the height, the width, the depth. I might have all these technical attributes around this product that are actually accurate. But they're not descriptive in a way that's meaningful for the buyer. For example, if you told me the dimensions of a fridge, I would probably have to get a ruler out and I would
Yeah.
have to visualize that in some way. And I'd have to measure the space that my fridge was going to go into. First of all, I'd make sure that it was going to fit. But second of all, I would need to know, is this considered a small, a medium, or a large fridge? Or I might not know, hey, this is suitable for a 2-person household, or this is suitable for a 4-person, the average 4-person household. This is considered a
Right.
medium-sized fridge that would suit a family of 4 for their food needs for a week or whatever it might be. And so what I'm
Mhm.
saying is there's technical attributes and then there's application
Yeah.
way means of turning that raw data into something that is meaningful for the person that is trying to assess suitability or fit of that item in their world, in their life. And so there's lots of ways we could describe that depending on how the buyer wants to buy. And so I've thought about this many times before, and I don't think there's necessarily an easy solve for that apart from when we have a ChatGPT-like layer over the top of that really accurate structured data. And if I
Yeah.
could query it, and I might say to a chat interface on a website, like for example, if I had either I brought my agent from ChatGPT with me to the shopping experience, or I asked ChatGPT the questions before I went to the website, or if the website spun up an agent on my behalf that was acting as a concierge that I could ask questions of. I'm on a PDP. I want to be able to ask the spun up agent that's assigned to my shopping session. I want to be able to say, is this considered a large fridge? Is this considered a medium fridge? Would this be suitable for a family of 2? It's just me and my wife and our 2 dogs. Would this be typically considered suitable for a family of my size, my type? And then I can have a conversation with that, and knowing what it knows from the broader internet around discussions that have been had around this stuff on Reddit and many other places and X and everywhere else, it then can help inform my buying decision in a very contextual and nuanced way. What do you think?
Yeah, and you just touched on exactly what I was going to say, which is one of the really valuable sources of information that we can feed in is reviews. What people are saying about this product online, right? It could be on Reddit, it could be on X, could be directly in the review section. And that's how I make these purchasing decisions. I'm like, I look through all the reviews and I see, oh yeah, this is great for me and for X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, I'm the same use case, or I also have a dog, and whatever it is, you're thinking or finding ways to relate or resonate with other users. And as humans, obviously, we are very social individuals, and social proof is one of the best ways to improve conversion of any product, right? And so we notice this at Uber as well, right? If you have the ratings and reviews and the stars and all of that, that matters more than almost anything. And so trying to bake in what users are saying about this product, what are the key highlights, and having this like kind of feedback loop, which is, hey, users are highlighting these key use cases about this product. Let's service them on PDPs so that if similar people come and visit the page, they know exactly what it's good for and maybe what it's not good for. And so similarly, a good example is if you're trying to figure out the size of an item and you see a size chart and you don't know your own measurements, you're like, oh, I don't know. But then maybe you see, hey, this is large on me. You should get the medium. And like this big. You're like, okay, I'm a 6-foot individual and I should get a medium, right? And so that's a lot more beneficial to me than seeing a graphic of a size chart, which again is like just an image and someone has to click into it and view it and parse it and process it. An AI agent probably not even going to be able to see that. So how do we take all of that structured, unstructured information, put it in a structured way, and then also put it in a way that resonates with potential customers that are trying to make purchasing decisions, right? Right now, there's so much friction in finding the information that you need. And why is there so much friction? It's just because there's a lot of manual work needed to make it frictionless. And now with AI, we can do a lot of these things and make the entire purchasing journey a lot more frictionless, give users all the information they need to make those decisions. So that's really the key pain that we're trying to solve and make go away with our solution as well.
Yeah, and I guess even just the general knowledge of the internet starts to come into play here. For example, let's just go back to the fridge example. If the general consensus on the internet is, cool, a family of 4 would need a 400-liter fridge or whatever the average, a 200 to 400-liter fridge is common. 100 liters per person is common for household usage, right? Domestic usage. Obviously, commercial kitchen, totally different. And that also is some of the nuance, right? Saying, okay, where are you going to be using this? And maybe even having the agent ask clarifying questions and saying, okay, that's cool. But you want to use this here, but is this for domestic use or is this for commercial use? If it's for domestic use, how many people? Okay, cool. According to the internet or according to most research, you're going to need a fridge that is a minimum of 100 liters per person in the household to be able to hold enough food to service the family for a week or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because most people do a weekly shopping session or something like that,
Yeah.
right? And so it feels we are going to get to a place where even ChatGPT doesn't do that well. It'll sometimes say at the end of a response, it'll say, oh, would you like me to structure this data a different way? Or would you like me to find more information about this? But it doesn't necessarily say before it gives you a response. It doesn't ask you clarifying questions before it gives you an initial response. It gives you a response, and then it says, oh, would you like some additional information about this? And I feel like the next layer of this or the next stage of this is going to be agents that act more like sales assistants inside physical stores today. And I've used this example on the podcast before. If I walk into a jewelry store and I walk in, the sales rep behind the counter is not going to just plunk 20 things on the counter. They're gonna ask me like 10 qualifying questions, and then they're gonna pick 1, 2, 3 items from the counter that fit kind of what they think would be a match for the questions, the answers I gave to the questions they asked. And I feel like that's perhaps the next iteration of agentic AI is the ability for the agent to ask very smart questions, which today it's more an answer engine, meaning I ask a question, it gives me an answer, right? I feel like we've got some work to do in that area still.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that is definitely going to be the next step, which is understanding user intent, preferences before making suggestions. But I'm thinking 5 years ahead, it's going to be that AI already knows everything about you, right? It's like your personal shopping assistant. It knows you have a family of 4. It knows exactly where you live, where your house is based on your other search queries. It's like personalization at scales we've never seen before, where it's they're almost a creepy like experience where it's like, how did you know that? And it's probably has context on who you are, where you grew up, and knows how to recommend you products accordingly. And so that's, I think, the eventual state that the world is going to get to. So it's a question of then, when we are at that stage, how do you make sure that your products are the ones that are surfaced, right? And so personalization at that scale, and whether that's built in ChatGPT or it's a separate shopping assistant, or as you're saying, it's something agnostic of different retailers or different brands, we'll see how that shapes up. But I think we know that we want to be part of the data layer that is solving that transfer of information, right? From everything you know about a product and making sure that's actually being serviced to the people that are searching for those products.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an element of lock-in to specific retailers. It's going to bring an element of lock-in to specific agentic platforms like ChatGPT, because I've redirected all my browser queries to ChatGPT with an app. So I use Brave and it redirects I haven't used Google. I haven't done a Google search, and I can't remember the last time I did a Google search. Now all my queries go to ChatGPT. But as a result of that, and knowing which queries I like and which ones I interact with and which queries I refine, it's knowing a lot about me. And I'd be
Yeah,
loath to switch wholesale to another agentic platform or another answer engine today, because then any new system has to learn a whole lot about me before it can start really starting to tailor those responses. So I agree with you. I think the more a system knows about us, because if it knows our purchase history and it can contextualize that purchase history by saying, okay, when he buys a pair of shoes, he doesn't buy the most expensive pair, but he also doesn't buy the cheapest pair. So he tends to buy the kind of mid-market shoe, average price of $200 or whatever it is. He likes these top 3 brands, which tells me this about him, because he buys these 3 brands. That tells me a lot more about him or her. And so it can start making really smart inferences about us that the standard wisdom of the crowd personalization could never do.
100%. And we've seen that already at Uber, for example, where obviously you're logged in and you've probably seen it's like, how did you know I want a Thai food right now? Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
Funny that.
all of this intelligence that's going in and knows that on Tuesdays you're craving Asian food and here is the one that you like the most. Or people that like this also tend to like this. So why you're going to like it too. Right. And so it's so interesting because we've seen that work at scales of Uber or let's say Instagram in terms of the recommendation algorithms. But imagine, global recommendation algorithms that will know everything about you across not just the context of what you've ordered on Uber or scroll on Instagram, but actually everything you've ever purchased and ever will continue to purchase and how that evolves and it stays up to date with that. And so it is interesting to think about that future state of the world and how soon we'll get there and what are the hurdles along the way. Right. I think there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built in order to support that type of future, whether that's the transaction layer, which is, okay, I said yes. Now go make that transaction and show me the shipping details and tell me when it's getting to my house. Or if it's the informational layer, which is what we're involved in, right? And what is all the information about those products? If it's the logistics layer, how do we actually get those products delivered, agnostic of where you shop for them? So really interesting. And I think there's probably going to be really large players that come up in each of these areas. But yeah, again, interesting to always project forward as to what the future might look like. And then what do we need to do today in order to enable that to come true?
Love it. Love it. And is there anything you don't yet do in the platform that your customers are asking for, that you say, yep, we don't do that today, but give us 6 months and we'll be doing that thing, or these 2 additional things? Or are there any other gaps in the market that you already recognize and you go, yep, we don't do that today. It's on our radar, and sometime next 6, 12, 18 months, we're going to be plugging that gap because we think that's a market opportunity that's just too good to pass up.
Yeah, I think the primary thing that we've been always getting asked for is how do you know how good it is? How do you know the accuracy? And obviously, going into this, we also have those questions. How good is it? And a lot of our customers have those questions. So, how do you give them the peace of mind and the confidence that, hey, this AI is not going to hallucinate? When ChatGPT 3 came out, everyone was like, it's always hallucinating. And obviously, that kind of discourages some of the trust or adoption or these AI models. And obviously, they've got a lot bigger. Step function increases and how good they are today compared to when they were first released. And the bet is it's going to keep getting better over time. But how do you give people the confidence that the models can be trusted? And a lot of that is creating the right guardrails around where it's pulling in the information, how, whether it is the right context, right? There's a new kind of term that's coming up, not prompt engineering, but context engineering. That's a really interesting one. Giving the models the same context that a human has to make those decisions. How do you run validation at scale, right? How do you make sure, as a human, I go in and sanity check the data, how can we even automate that process so that an AI is reviewing the output to the first AI? And these are the things that we've really been investing in and starting to really scope out and build, is giving people the confidence to say, okay, because if you're not entirely automating the process, it's really not that valuable. If a human still needs to go in and make all these tweaks, then it's sometimes even harder to figure out those issues than it was to do it in the first place. So we really want to bet on the models getting better, and then also having the systems around the models to make sure that it's purpose built for this use case, and users can trust the data that's coming out of our system or any system.
And I guess at the very least, self-identify where a human should get involved. Like, for example, obviously, if it says, look, I'm not going to make up something, but I can't really find anything meaningful or useful to map into this product, so I'm going to flag it for manual intervention by a human being. I think being self-aware enough, so to speak, to be able to
Yeah,
recognize where, okay, cool, I'm not going to just stuff a piece of data in here because it's close. Our target level of accuracy has to be sufficiently high, or the barrier to entry for a piece of data to be entered into the database by the machine has to be sufficiently, in other words, it has to have a very high bar of filtration, right? And basically, otherwise, just say, look, we're not even going to try this because it's unlikely we're going to be close enough for it to be accurate. So let's turn this back over to the human driving the machine. And that feels like a really important safety net as part of the system.
exactly. And if you assign the task to human, they'd probably come back and say, I'm not sure about this. Can you provide more context? LLMs, to your point, don't do that today, but I think that they will. And we can enable some of that through, as you're mentioning, right? Gather the requirements and the clarifications before executing. And so I think that's definitely an interesting one for us to explore as part of this whole validation and accuracy improvement over time that we're going to keep seeing. But yeah, really interesting point that you bring up.
I love it. I love it. And how do you guys charge for your platform? Is it based on number of SKUs enriched? Is it based on size of total catalog that we're trying to maintain? Is it based on the number of outputs we're trying to send out and the way that it's sliced and diced, so to speak? Or is it a modular platform to where I'm paying for different modules that do different things? How do you structure the way that you price your platform?
Yeah, we charge a fixed monthly fee based on your overall catalog size. So based on your buckets, if you're between 10 to 50K SKUs versus 100K SKUs plus, right, there would be a tiered monthly price that comes along with that. And then obviously we'll adjust it up or down depending on the complexity of your attribute system or kind of the specific requirements that you need. But yeah, I think we've thought about the value in terms of it speeds up your team, and then the quality of the information is a lot better. So ideally that drives incrementally a lot more sales. And so that's how we thought about how we price. And I think that's been resonating pretty strongly with some of our customers today.
Yeah, I guess at some point you'll put pricing on your website because I can't seem to find it unless I'm just an idiot. Oh, and two things you want to fix about your website. In the footer, still says 2024, not 2025. And it says Angler Technologies, not Anglera. So there you go. Couple of free tips about your website.
Awesome.
And so I guess at some point when you feel like you are at a pretty sustainable place from a pricing perspective and you can predict what pricing makes sense for you guys as a business to make you sustainable, then you'll be able to publish that on the website. Is that right?
Exactly. And I think pricing for AI has just never been done before. And everyone is
Yeah.
trying to figure out, how do people see the value of the AI solutions and how should we price for them? Because obviously there's our own cost to run the underlying models. And so I think a lot of unknowns right now. And so we're trying to figure out and navigate that based on what the market is telling us in terms of willingness to pay. And I think once we kind of refine that further and further, we'll be able to actually go ahead, publish pricing tiers on our website and make sure it's reasonable for kind of everyone involved and also transparent. I think that's something we're working towards as soon as possible.
I love it. And if people want to get a hold of you and chat to you about all things AI-powered product data enrichment, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well as a link to the website in the show notes. But other than that, how do you like people to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can email me directly. My first name, Amay, at Anglera.com, or you could go on our website and book 15 minutes with me if you're interested in chatting and learning more. Always happy to talk about this, as you can probably tell. And so, yeah, if you are thinking about it, or if you have come across or faced similar challenges, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have a chat. Yeah, feel free to just book a time or just reach out directly.
I love it. And would you consider the product fully out of beta? It's in production. Customers are actually using it. Or are you still in that design partner phase, or you've got a commercially, like at least to a V1 level product that customers can consume today?
Yeah, it's definitely ready for use. And so we have several customers using it on a daily basis, and it's continuing to scale up as we roll out to more customers and customers continue to build additional use cases on top of the existing workflows that we have set up for them. And yeah, definitely let me know if you're interested in trying it or taking a look at what we're able to do today. And obviously, I would love to always chat more about where this is going to continue to evolve and grow over time, because obviously we come from these technical YC backgrounds, which is always like build fast, right? Work with your customers, figure out what their needs are, and then continue building in that way. So yeah, always open to hearing more. Customer feedback, I think, is always important to us.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. And are you building, you may not know the answer to this just yet, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is your vision that you want to build this up as fast as possible and then maybe sell to a much larger tech company or somebody that wants to integrate it into their other SaaS platform like their PIM or their commerce platform or whatever? Is it, or do you have visions of wanting to go public? I know this is thinking a few steps ahead, but some founders do have, when they go in and they start building something, they're like, nope, I'm going to build this for 2 years and then I'm going to position us to get acquired by somebody much bigger with much bigger resources. Kind of, have you thought that far ahead, or is this still too early days for you to even know what the future holds for you?
Yeah, I think we see it as a 10-year journey, and there's so much kind of opportunity in terms of applying AI to this sector, right? And I think a lot of people are not looking at it, or they're going to start looking at it too late. And so we're trying to grow as quickly as possible and try to kind of capture as much of the low hanging fruit that there is and the workflows that can be sped up and automated and accelerated and the value that can be created in this kind of industry. And so our goal is just to keep learning and figuring out based on existing customers and what the market is telling us, and continue to expand our core offerings and create this kind of compound software type of startup, which is like we start off with one specific problem that we're solving, and then 2 years from now we're solving 5 problems, and 10 years from now we're solving 100 different problems. So that's how we're approaching it, and we'll obviously see how that shapes up in the future.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You're fully self-funded, or have you had any investment into the company so far?
So we went through Y Combinator, and that was our kind of our seed round that we
That's right.
raised.
You did too.
Last demo day, we raised our seed round from some great firms and strategic angel partners as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Listen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a ton. It's been super enjoyable for me. We went down quite a few different rabbit holes here to explore what the product is and how it works and kind of what your vision for the future is. And I learned a ton, and I really appreciate your time. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, I get to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Amay Aggarwal from Anglera, what is your question for me today?
Yeah. I have a ton of questions. I'm trying to pick the one that I think is most relevant and most useful. I would say the key one that we always get, and I want to ask you this, right, is kind of around enrichment for product information has always been this intractable problem, is what people have put it as. And a lot of people have tried and failed, right? And we think that we might be the ones to solve it. But I'd be curious to learn about, from your experience, what is the key challenge? Why do you think that solutions in the past have failed? And do you think that there is this why now with LLMs that we might be able to solve this problem once and for all?
Yeah, the other platforms in the space or that try to do similar things, and some of them are 3, 4, 5, 10 years old in some instances. Most of them tried to take a kind of a rules-based approach to what they do based on machine learning, right? And okay, here's the rules, here's the guardrails, and this is what we're trying to do with it. Almost like most of these systems use some form of if-then model, right? Almost always. And whether that's machine vision, machine learning, whatever their data inputs are, we're trying to, I liken it almost like the old OCR days. That's the way that I look at things and compare things. It's not quite as ancient as the OCR days, but it's a rules-based system. And unfortunately, that does not leave as much room for fuzzy logic as the LLMs allow us. And I can upload, and I've used this example on the pod before too. I was trying to buy a dirt bike recently. I ultimately ended up buying a KTM, but when I was looking at motorbikes, there was quite a few on Facebook Marketplace that didn't have the year. So it'd say like the make and model, and it would say the features or whatever, but it wouldn't say the year. So I could take an image, I could download the image to my desktop, upload it to ChatGPT, and I could say, tell me what this motorcycle is, and say nothing more. And it would say, based on the image, it looks like it's this, it looks like it's this make, model, and year. Oh, and by the way, it's had this piece that's been upgraded because it's got a different seat or it's got whatever else it might be. So it looks like it's this, but there's some other little unique characteristics about it that maybe tell us that this falls within a range of 3 years or something like that. Now, the great thing about that is that requires multimodal thinking or multimodal capabilities. I can upload a 100-page PDF today into ChatGPT, and I can
Right.
say, I can ask it to give me a summary, and it'll give me a 2-paragraph summary. I can ask it to expand on the summary. I can ask it for to find a specific piece of information in that document, whereas historically, I would have had to have opened that PDF in something like Adobe Reader, do a Control F, try to find that keyword,
Right.
and then try to parse it myself.
Mhm.
Whereas ChatGPT can do that multimodal parsing in an instant, including the embedded images. It can read and interpret the embedded images and draw reasonable conclusions from those images and present it in a meaningful way to me as a human using the English language or Spanish or whatever I want.
Mm.
I can upload, because I live in Mexico now and my Spanish is intermediate, but there's certain packaging that has like a long list of ingredients or like a recipe or some instructions or something like that. And so I'll take a photo of it with my phone, I'll upload that into ChatGPT, and I won't want to have to think about it, and I'll just say, can you just translate this to English for me? So I can
Yeah.
take an image in Spanish or a contract that is a embedded image in a PDF. And historically, if I wanted to try to convert a long string of text that was in a foreign language into English, I would have had to have had it would have to be in plain text for a start so that I could copy and paste it. Even in the early days of ChatGPT, I would have had to have something that I could copy and paste into it from Spanish that then it could translate text to text. But now I can give it any format of data and draw something meaningful out of it according to the structure that I'm looking for in terms of output. And I think that, to me, is the biggest differentiating factor in the new version of AI, the next generation of AI. I think people underestimate the power just of the multimodal piece. That to me is the thing that has elevated this technology above all versions that came
Yeah.
before it.
It's funny because 15 years ago, we were impressed if I could label hot dog or not hot dog. You
Yes.
remember?
Yes.
Now look at where we are, right? Now there's self-driving cars on the road. Yeah, it's just so interesting and so exciting to think about where we are now. Projecting that forward is just, it's crazy. I think where we'll be and what the capabilities will be, right? It's more about how do we then use them to our advantage.
Yeah, and I think we're all still trying to figure out even how we can fully apply the existing tech in new ways, because I'm constantly, every single day, I'm amazed by what ChatGPT can do for me. Like, I'm still amazed. It still
Yeah.
amazes me. I liken it, you're too young, but I remember the early days of Google. I remember when Google was when it first came out, and I remember how it was like, oh my word, like the internet suddenly became useful. It
Yeah.
was like, like, you don't have to be a genius to use the internet. You can find information everywhere through this
Yeah.
amazing technology. And there were search engines that obviously came before it, but it was so much better
Right.
that you wouldn't even consider what came before it a search engine, because Google was that much better. And
Yeah.
I feel like this technology is that much better that it almost obsoletes everything that came before it overnight. So it's pretty
Yeah.
wild.
Intelligence in a box.
Yeah.
It's
A
quite
black
crazy.
box, unfortunately, at times. Listen, this has been a really interesting conversation. It certainly stimulated a lot of thought from my side. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Definitely. And thank you for having me. And thank you for the great conversation and the amazing questions.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.